What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Sally Page. We're talking about her book, The Secrets of Flowers. That book will be available for American readers on February 25th. It has been available for readers in the UK, but now it is going to be available in the US. And I really enjoyed this conversation with Sally. I actually liked the book, and it had helped to inspire some of her character story. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Sally Page. So today we've got Sally Page. We're talking about The Secrets of Flowers. That book is available for American readers on February 25th. Sally, thank you so much for joining me today. I greatly enjoyed this book. I didn't know what to expect. We're gonna get into it, but I finished it today. It's fresh in my brain, and it touched on the feel and Violet, and I love the connections that you made between the two and the reveal. We'll try to be a little bit spoiler free for people who haven't are on this side of the globe who don't have access to it per se, at least not yet. But yeah, we're gonna get into it. Thanks for
Well,
joining me
thank you very
today.
much for having me.
Absolutely. So to get started, real quick, can you provide like a summary of the book so that people can follow along with the
Yes,
conversation?
certainly. It's a book that's obviously it's very much about flowers, but it's about a woman, Emma, whose husband has just died quite young, and she's struggling, and she decides to change jobs, and she goes to work in a garden centre working with flowers. And in the course of this, she comes across somebody who invites her to go to a talk about the Titanic. And she bottles it. She doesn't go because she's feeling so dreadful about things. But it gets her thinking about the Titanic. And she starts to watch a program about it. And because of her new interest in flowers, she starts to think, were there flowers on the Titanic? And was there a florist? And this becomes a bit of an obsession. And it's partly driven by grief, but partly driven by her genuine interest in flowers. And she goes on this journey. It's a sort of recovery, but also discovery. And in the course of that, she feels a very close connection with one of the stewardesses on board, and she can't work out why. And so, what you have is a dual narrative of Emma's story, the young widow, but also Violet, who was a stewardess on the Titanic. And that part of the book is historically accurate, but it's about how we connect through flowers, but a lot more than that.
Yeah. Ugh, I know. It's like in a nutshell. It's like there's definitely layers to it and so much of it. It's because at first I was like, well, it's a slower pace, but I think I expected it just because of the nature of the genre. Usually it's like women's fiction, dual timeline historical fiction. So there's definitely like some patience and some building, but it's like once some time into it, I was like, oh, wait a second. So like travel kind of progress with Emma through her journey
Good,
a little bit,
good.
and because it is sad, and I'm like she was like, what,
Yeah,
40 in the
yeah.
book or approaching 40? I'm 38, so I'm like, "Wait a second." I'm like, "Wait," and so I'm like, "Wait." For some reason, it doesn't or actually, oh, no, I'm gonna be 38 in 2 weeks. I'm just owning it now. But it's because a lot of the times I will read books that younger main characters, and for some reason, I'm, like, still in the mindset, "Oh, no, yeah, I'm part of that. I'm
Yeah.
part of that group." But I'm like, "No, like, I'm approaching midlife." Like, so this was a reality because I was like, "No, wait a second," especially since 40 is young
Yeah,
to be a
yeah,
widow, and
definitely.
she's already had established her career, and she was following that momentum and living
Mm,
her life and dealing with things in her marriage of I don't know if this is too spoilery, but it's part of like I could edit it out if it is because she couldn't have kids, and so she
mm,
was that kind of there's another layer to that,
yeah.
and she's dealing with her husband's passing even a year later, it's so telling because it's really tapped into, like, grief and recovery and healing and how she really had to go through it, like, she had to make some changes, and she had to go through it in order not just it's for
Mm.
herself, right?
But
It's
I
just to
very
improve
much with all
herself.
my books, they're really very much about friendship, and I think for this, one of the main themes in the book is that we can achieve so much when we work together. So the people who helped her, and I loved some of those
Mhm.
characters became very dear to me.
Me
Betty and
too.
Ted, who
Yeah.
worked at the garden centre, I really loved them. I loved Les. I just thought he was such a sweetheart.
Mm.
And I think that sense of that people will help, and I think there's one of the characters at one point says, "You have to ask for specific help," and that is what something I've experienced in my own life is when I've had one particularly difficult period, and what I realized is everybody wants to help. Everybody rushes and goes, "What can I do? What can I do?" And they don't know what to do. But when you actually say, "What I would love you to do is this," people do it. They really want to. It's just sometimes they don't know how to help. So I think that's what Emma
Yeah.
experienced is you ask for the help and people, if they can gift it to you, they will.
And I don't know if she really struck me as someone who was so against asking for help. I think she just didn't realize she
Yeah.
could. She was just used to doing things on her own or dealing with things on her own. But I absolutely I love that. That was one of the main messages is if you specify
Mm,
things like because it reminded me I'm very fortunate. Like I still have my husband and I have two small boys, but like my dad, my parents are both retired and they're like in my mom's in her 70s, my dad's in his late 60s. So like when he had an injury, a head injury that totally like, some of the sentiments resonated with me because it was so many people in our circle and our extended family, even, like, coworkers
mm,
were like, "How can we help? Like, how if you need anything, let us know." And it was
mm,
genuine. Even though it seems very a general
mm,
offer, it was so genuine, but that's such a good point that you make, it's if we just made it specific, we don't we have no like, dinner is
yeah,
the least of our
yeah,
worries right now. Like, we're not cooking
yeah,
right now because we're dealing with all this other stuff, and that's an example of something could use some dinner.
yeah,
We could use some pizza,
yeah.
if you don't mind. Things like
And
that
then
where
people are
or we
delighted
help.
because they go, "Yeah, I can do this. Let
Yeah,
me help you." Because often
yeah,
people fear, and I
yeah,
think that's what I think Emma experienced that within the book, but also she was quite an awkward character, and I think it became worse with her grief of saying the wrong thing, not knowing how to articulate, and then she's a woman who speaks a number of languages, and then suddenly realizing,
yeah.
actually, I communicate better in other languages, and
I love that you did that. Do you speak multiple
no,
languages or
I know,
you just
but that's and
okay,
I'm
so
really bad at
were
that.
you a
I'm really bad at but it's like, what I've discovered as an author is your characters can do anything. I've just
Yeah,
been
exactly.
editing a book today, and my main character there runs. Now, I am the most unsporty person going. I'm just really terrible at doing exercise, do a bit of yoga, but then I suddenly thought, actually, I can have a runner in my book. So I'm describing what it's like to run, which is just ridiculous because I never run, but
Ye
it's good. It's good.
too, and I think authors, writers, they're some of the smartest people in the world because they're not familiar with a
Mm,
lifestyle or an event. They do everything they
yeah,
can to familiarize themselves because they want it to be, like, authentic, and so that's tapping into one of my questions is, like, how did your research process go? Because there's a lot like you said, I love that when you
mm,
said, "Oh, part of it is a storyline is accurate historically
yeah,
accurate," I was like a little thing in my brain was like, "Oh, wait, what?" I thought that was so cool. Obviously, everybody knows what the
yeah,
Titanic was, everybody knows what happened in the Titanic. It's still even I thought it was great how people you acknowledge that people are in the story that people are still it's a
yeah,
fascinating topic,
definitely.
and as it was there was just so many there was countries involved, it was just such a huge scandal because there was so much hype around
Yeah,
it, I imagine, like, the however long it took to build
yeah,
it, and there's all this hype, and then on the voyage, a couple days after they set
yeah,
sail, it's like this tragedy happens, and then nobody they weren't prepared
yeah,
for it, and, like, when people just even calling for help, it was just, like, delayed, I think, from what I remember from little bits and pieces. There's a lot going on, so I wanna and you could get as nerdy as you want and, like, in your research, I wanna hear all of it, like, all your history buffs, because I love how Emma was like, "What category am I falling
yeah,
into?"
exactly.
Like
When I followed a journey and, then I made my character follow the journey in that I used to have a flower shop years ago. I've always loved flowers, and at one point, I thought I wanted to write about how flowers are really important in our lives and why. Oh, why do we use flowers in so many ways, so many different symbolisms, and but also artistically in interiors, in art, and I started researching that, but it's a massive subject. I think I was getting a bit carried away. But in the course of it, I
Mm.
thought, just as an anecdote, "Oh, I bet they had flowers on the Titanic." And because 'cause I'd been a florist myself, I was like, "I wonder if they had a florist on board." And like Emma, I started to do the research, and what you discover is they had everybody on board. Oh, electricians, window cleaners, buglers, interpreters, lamplighters, everything, every side of chef you could think of, but there was no florist. And so then you go, okay, but then I also discovered it was a ship full of flowers. And I think to me that was the changing point in how I became hooked on this story and then evolved into researching and finding about Violet, one of the stewardesses on board. And it was
Is that her real
yes, it is her
name,
real name.
or
It is her real name, and she is a
that's
woman
amazing.
who
That is
loved
so
flowers.
cool.
But I think it was that sense of I discovered that the flowers were brought on board the night before they sailed from Southampton. The plants were put around the ship, but the flowers were put into storage. And I found the flower storage areas on the plans of the Titanic. And then you do get some passengers recording that it was a ship full of flowers, and they said that the air was so fragrant that it reminded people of being in the French Riviera. Now that's a lot of flowers,
Mm,
but nobody has seen that apart from the people who sailed her because they didn't allow press on board. They didn't do photography. They didn't use photography like we do now. They
yeah.
probably photographed the interior shots they've got were probably done when it came out of Belfast, so from the Holland and Wolff works. So what I suddenly thought was there's a whole side to what that world would have looked like that nobody has
Mhm.
seen or envisaged. So something like the film Titanic, you obviously it was very meticulously researched, and you've got all the beautiful surroundings. But I don't think they really worked out well that this would have been a floral landscape as well. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
idea is that actually nobody saw that. So that fascinated me. And also, I think following on to Violet's story, I think a lot has been written about the very wealthy people who sailed on the Titanic. There's more being written now about the sort of steerage classes, the sort of and how difficult it was, and actually how it was really transportation for people emigrating. But the staff aren't really talked about. The captain is, of course, but I thought, what was it actually like to work? And it was hard work, but there was massive camaraderie amongst the people who worked there, and they'd work on the different ships. Violet herself worked on three of the White Star liners, three of which were involved in two of them. I think two of them sunk and one was involved in a really bad collision. She saw her fair share of tragedy and escaped. Spoiler, but she does live. It's quite good.
Yeah. That's wild to me because that's one thing. It's okay, is she bad luck, or is she
I know she was either really lucky
or
or
she
very
got
bad luck.
good luck,
Yeah,
or she got good
yeah,
luck, like, it's because it's I've read another book that reminded me of that. It was called it was a historical fiction. It was like The Unkillable Kitty O'Kane or
yeah.
something like that. It was about, like, a woman from Ireland, and she survived the Titanic and one of the other ones, and I was like, but it was one part of her journey where she's involved in, so many, like,
Yeah,
tragedies, but she makes out of it,
yeah.
and so that's the thing that it reminds me of. It's she yeah, like, she survived, and then it was like, "Stop working for the white liners." Like, what?
Exactly, change your job. Change your job. I think with Violet's story, I felt it was more obviously, the main part of the book is about Emma's story, it's a contemporary novel, but all my books have got, like, a historical thread that runs through them because 'cause I'm really interested in history. But I think with Violet, it was more her voice I found. I found and obviously that's my imagination as well as the research I've done, but it is obviously a lot of it is my imaginings. And it was just it links into Emma's story is that we achieve more when we work together, and it's about friendship
Yeah,
and hope and dealing with difficult things. So,
and that's so profound because and maybe a little ironic, I don't know if that's the appropriate word, but because Emma, she was definitely forced out of her comfort zone to do
definitely.
to do that
yeah,
research. Like, she was social
yeah,
anxiety. Like, that's the best I
yeah,
could, because she tried to go to the lecture, but then she freaked out and then was like, "I
yeah,
can't." And she did feel that guilt still, but she was like, I'm not ready for
yeah,
this, I can't do
yeah.
this." And I didn't know if it's because she was used to, and then we can get into, like, her mom and stuff, because that's such a, like, a
Mhm.
tenuous relationship, and that probably had a lot to do with it,
Yeah.
because I got the impression that she stood out, no matter, even if she didn't
Oh,
want to,
definitely.
'cause she's, like, tall and
Tall
she
and
has
curly red hair, so she was a very
yeah.
so, yeah, it's just like
Oh my god.
fate, it's not good.
And then yeah, she wanted to change, and I absolutely loved Betty and Les too, but then it's like when she wanted to go on this project, it happened organically, like, she wasn't forced to, she,
Yeah,
like, accepted, "Okay, I have to talk to this person, and then I have to talk
yeah,
to this
exactly.
person, and actually, this person has this person has this
Yeah,
information," and going back to one of the themes is, no, they're happy to
yeah,
help, they're happy to, even, like, with, it reminds me of situations where she's in with Roberto.
yeah,
She didn't ask for his help, but he was still
yeah,
like,
there to
"No,
yeah,
here." And I think the language, the shared of, because I half of my family is
mm,
Mexican, and I've worked with a lot of people who are from the country speaks second, third languages, and that's I love that you included that sentiment of, she felt more comfortable in certain
yeah,
languages, and she
definitely.
felt more at home speaking, like, she felt that connection immediately with people who were speaking languages that she was comfortable
Yeah,
with, and I love that too. That was also another curious thing, if, 'cause I'm assuming you grew up in the UK,
yeah,
and so there it's so different, diverse, like, it's super diverse here in America, but at the same time, you don't have that. It's the US, it's like we all speak English, most of us speak English, but then it's like in Europe, it's you can anybody there can probably speak 2 or 3 languages.
but
So,
not the
it's just because of
English
the
usually. We're
proximity.
traditionally, we're really bad at learning languages, and I am as well. We're very la I that's a generalization to say we're lazy. Some people are very good at languages. I'm not,
Sure,
but,
yeah.
we do tend to be a bit we assume people are gonna speak English.
And usually that assumption is
Yeah,
correct, it's
yeah,
just not there
no.
first. So, I assume maybe, like, you're used to that, knowing people who speak, or meeting with people who speak multiple languages. Was that part of your research? Were you, like, putting out your
I
feelers and seeing who
well,
knows what
I
and
did
stuff like
speak
that?
to a Spanish friend just to make sure I got some of the phrases right.
Yeah.
I think part of it is coming back to that thing of writing something that you want to write, and having somebody who speaks multiple languages is the thing I can't do, and so to have a character who it's like the thing I'm a bit jealous of her because she can speak the
Yeah.
languages, but I could write a character who can do that. So it was really nice for me, and but I did speak to people, obviously, who speak the languages just to make sure I was getting it right in terms of some of the wording and things like
Yeah, that's common with a lot of authors I speak to, where they have somebody, like a consultant, who
yeah, mine are more
is, like,
friends. I just ask my
available.
friends. Yeah, you
Yeah.
find somebody somewhere who goes, "Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
this is"
'Cause if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it
yeah,
right. It's like, no,
exactly,
you gotta,
exactly, and
and to do it authentically, and not like that's somebody who's, yeah, 'cause there's definitely a difference into, like, somebody who learns the language
yeah,
naturally growing up, either from family members or just from speaking it in natural conversation, learning that way, versus somebody who's, like, formal
yeah,
education.
yeah.
And those are some of those are, like, people will tell. People
And
can
also, it's
notice
really
for
nice
sure.
if as an author, you get to go and research these things. So one scene that is set a chapter that's set in Seville in Spain, so I got to
Yeah.
go there. I was like, "I need to go because I knew I wanted to use this particular guy for a scene. So I went with a girlfriend. We went for a long weekend there, which is just lovely. We had such good fun. And also I did go to all the Titanic museums over here. So in Ireland, there are 2 in Ireland, in Belfast and Cove. I went to both of those. Went to the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the Maritime Museum in Greenwich, the City Museum in Southampton. So I went and visited these places because it did help with the research, but it's research I was really interested in.
Yeah, especially since you were a florist. I'll get into your
Mm,
background too, because that sounds so fascinating and so, like, fun. I'm like, I want a green thumb, but I don't think I'll ever have one. It's every year
yeah,
I try to plant, like, flowers. I try something different every year. And then I've also gotten in mostly, like, deck
yeah,
plants, right? Like, I don't have a huge, like, bed or raised garden or anything like
yeah,
that. I'm not confident
Yeah.
in that yet, but I do the deck, the containers,
Nice.
and
Yeah.
we started with with my sons, we do, like, the little grape tomatoes and the
Yeah.
basil, and we start with the jalapeno peppers, like, my husband and I love
Yeah.
those. It's 'cause, like, I try to think of things that we will actually
Yeah.
use, like, we use basil for our
Yeah.
pizzas, like, whatever.
Definitely.
It's because otherwise basil, it's like it's herbs, usually they grow like
Yeah.
weeds. I have too much of this. But it's something fun to do with them, and it's just something that I just always wanna learn. Because my mom, she's pretty good at growing things, like, she's got I'm jealous of her backyard, her patio, her little, like, fountain
Yeah.
garden area. I'm like, "Mom, you have to come over and help me." Like, so I'm so interested, and I love the fact that I think I could tell in your writing that you had fun with that and with the
Yeah.
connections.
And
Well, every chapter, every point of view had some sort of connection and integration
yeah.
into that. So I wanna, like, explore your background and how you, like, approach that and organize it, all
I
good
think
stuff.
it's, because I used to run a flower shop years ago, and, my background is I have a degree in history, so that's why I'm really interested
Oh,
in
okay.
that.
There you go.
But then when I left university, I went to London, and I lived in London for about 10 years, and I worked in advertising, which was all right, but it was never my love, paid the bills, and it was at the time quite
Sure.
a prestigious thing to be involved in. But I went to an
Right.
evening class and on floristry, and so suddenly I was making things with flowers, and I was like, "Oh, I really like this." So I got a Saturday job in a flower shop, and
Good.
eventually I started a shop. I started a flower shop. I was so naive. I just can't believe how naive I was about running a shop. But so I ran a shop, and then I was pregnant with my first daughter. I have 2 girls, and I thought babies just sat in the back of the shop. I don't know what my mother thought. She must just thought I was mad. She was just like after a couple of years,
Little rude
I sold,
awakening.
and I left it alone for a while, and I went back, used my advertising background to run a market research company, so I could do that whilst I was bringing the girls up. And then when they were teenagers, they just went, "Mom, you're just missing the flowers. You need to just go and work 1 day a week in a flower shop." So that's what I did. I followed their advice, and I worked in this lovely flower shop, and I recorded a year of the flowers. So I actually wrote a book. So I've written some non-fiction books, which are floristry books. So they're a year in the life of an English country flower shop. Because what I could see is you get all the stories of the people who come through, the different seasons, the different events, the different places you go to. Because you, as a florist, you can. And I always say to people, ask a florist where to eat in a town, because they'll have seen the kitchens. Because the florist is always the ones delivering, setting stuff up. Yeah,
Insightful. I remember reading that part in the book where it's flowers are everywhere.
yeah,
Flowers are a part of every occasion, like whether it's funerals, weddings, restaurants, you send them among
yeah,
friends, you send them among
yeah,
lovers. It's like that was like I was like, "Shit, that is so
yeah.
true." I was like,
And you it's like you can't. My first book that came out, The Keeper of Stories, which is about really everyone has a story to tell, but it's about a woman who says, "What if you don't have a story?" And she's having a difficult life, so she starts to collect other people's stories. That really came from partly from the ideas of when I was working in the flower shop, because you couldn't make up the stuff in a flower shop. But it's predominantly about friendship. In the UK, I think I read it's 85% of women of flowers are sent from women to women. So it's about friendship. It's about your friend is grieving, your friend is celebrating, your friend is having a rubbish day, your friend's it's her birthday, and that's where a lot of flowers get sent. But you do read lots of different things about flowers. So that experience formed my starting point for when I started to look at were there flowers on the Titanic. But it was very much it informed Emma's story as well, the fact that she went and worked as a florist. And so each chapter is named after a flower. And I loved that research. And that was just pure pleasure for me because I love flowers.
so did you have to, like, retire or sell your shop? Because I imagine you tapping into this project, Secrets of Flowers, helped you revisit those positive
Yeah,
and
and
good
my shop was
memories.
sold
Yeah.
a long time ago. So that was when I was in my 20s, really, 20s, early 30s. And then
Wait, you were a flower shop
in
owner in
London
your
in my
20s?
20s and 30s, so late.
What am I doing with
Yeah,
my life?
don't
Wait,
worry, don't be a florist. Oh my goodness, a florist life is so hard. It's so hard to make money as a florist. It's such hard work. So I'm really fortunate. So
yeah.
I now have a lot of florist friends, but I get to write about flowers and I go to flower shops, but to run a flower shop's very hard work. Not that
I can't imagine. I can't even it's so much work for me to keep my container
yeah,
plants going, just for 4 or 5
yeah,
months out of the year, because I think I plant them in May, and cross my fingers, water them,
yeah,
do some fertilizing. I look up and see, like, I got my coffee grounds and my eggshells,
yeah,
like, in there, like, try to
good.
look at things, like, here and there, and but then I don't protect them very well, so it's like I'll hear my sons last year we tried strawberry, like, little strawberry
Yeah,
bush, and I would see the flowers were cute, and then I would see the little fruit budding out of it, but then a couple mornings, I heard my sons, "There's a squirrel eating our hey, shoo, squirrel, shoo."
but
And
Megan,
I'm
I
like,
think you have to be
"Oh."
kind to yourself because the reality is, look, you're working full time, you're doing your book things, you've got little children. Quite frankly, the
Yeah,
fact you've got
thank
some
you.
containers, I'm really impressed 'cause
I
you just
appreciate
can't do
that.
it
I
all. I see
appreciate
it with
that.
my daughter. My daughter is also an author, and I've got a grandson, so he's
Okay.
3. My daughter
Aw.
Libby was a Sunday Times bestseller before I was. She's was always writing. She's
That's, like, something to say about, like, you peek into that into the information,
yeah,
like, what trickles
yeah.
down without even
Yeah,
realizing it.
but
Yeah,
she's got
I
a
love
little
that.
one now, and she's amazing. Of course, her house isn't always tidy. Of course, their garden isn't
Yeah.
all
Oh,
together. Why would it
yeah.
be with little 3-year-old running around and both trying to do stuff? So, I think it's much easier when my girls are left home and I'm writing full time. I can have much more flexibility.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm lucky that I get to work from home and that because my kids are 7 and
Yeah,
4, so they're, like, into that they're slowly entering that time that their schedules are more, like,
yeah,
school-based, and so I'm just, like, patiently biding my
yeah.
time that where I'm slowly getting more time back to
Yeah, but they're
myself,
still
where I
really
don't have
little. They're
to
still really little. It'll come.
I'm grateful for the circle, also the support circle that we have with because we all of our grandparents are still here and able to chip in, watch on a schedule. So it's super helpful. But that's awesome. I love that you don't sound bitter at all that your daughter like got
Oh
there.
my
She
goodness.
achieved that
Oh
little
my
that
goodness.
little slash big
Oh, she
milestone,
was
yeah,
way
before you
before me.
did.
She was writing I think by the time my first novel came out, she got about 3 novels out there, and it was always she was so good at it when she was growing up. She was just so amazing as a writer that I just always knew that's what she'd do, and although I did eventually do my flower books, I didn't really think I was a creative writer, and then one day, that was 2016, I just woke up with an idea for a story in my head, but once I started writing, I couldn't stop, and it took me a long time to get
Mm.
a publisher and an agent. So by the time my first book came out, I'd got about 5 books written, but it was just that sense of once I discovered it, I just loved writing.
That's awesome. I love that. No, but you're not alone there because a lot of the authors that I speak to, it takes some of them, they have the story for 10 years and then they decide, go
Yeah.
for it. It's so like you're on your journey and you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this and I'm going to see what it's about. But then I'm glad that you didn't get discouraged about the process
I did of
because,
course, I got discouraged at the time. It was
yeah,
really
of
miserable because
course.
you have to deal with an awful lot of rejection. Obviously, some authors get a deal first straight away, but most authors are you slog away at it.
Yeah.
But then my daughter Libby encouraged me. Also, you come across advice. I listened to an interview with Elizabeth Strout, who wrote Olive Kittredge, and obviously she's a very well-known author. And she said when she got rejected, she just kept thinking, "I must write better." And I thought, "That's really good advice. I'll just keep doing, just keep trying to improve." Yeah, and now, of course, I'm very fortunate because I can do it for my living, but yeah,
Yeah.
you just keep going.
I no, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you being on like just being open with your struggle because it's so you're not alone. You're not alone. Like it does take a minute and it's like you gotta find and so many publishers, they're like they're going off of trends,
Oh,
right? They're
very
going
much
off of
so.
sales and potential audiences, and the trend it's by the time you sign something, then, like you alluded to when we were chatting for a little bit, is where you're writing something that wasn't gonna be out for another year. Like, you signed something, but it wasn't gonna be out for a year, and then so you were working on something else, and but that's so true because it's like, next year, the trends might be different, they likely will be different, and it's just honestly, I think there's an audience out there for, like, almost everything. Like, it's you just gotta find your people. There are a handful of people that will love your books, and there's a handful of people who might be like, "Eh, it's not for me."
Of
Like,
course, and I
and
was
it's
a
just so
member of a book club for quite a while over here, and the great thing about it is you get to read stuff you wouldn't normally read, people recommend things, but also what you learn is that people have strong views about books. They'll completely agree. People will go, "I loved it," and people go, "I hated it. It was awful. I hated the main."
Mhm, mhm.
But what it makes me realize as an author is it's not personal. Some people,
Yeah,
hopefully, will like my books and are very complimentary. Some people will go, "Oh, no, it wasn't for me," or "It was too slow," or and then you have to go, "I accept that." It's and
yeah.
having been in a book club, that really helps me.
Oh, that's awesome. It's like channeling your inner Emma,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
She had to accept things because there's bouncing back in between some of the themes and, like, the journey that she was on. She had a hard time again, trying to be spoiler free, she had a hard time with
yeah,
forgiveness, and she had a hard time with acceptance
yeah,
and with letting things go, especially when it came to her mother. Like, I love where her journey ended up, where she was just so content and secure, where she was like, I don't care about showing her up
yeah,
anymore. I don't care about
and I think that
making this
yeah.
point. It's I love that. I
And
love
I
that.
did wonder about, as I was writing it, about somebody mother lives in France, she's in the UK, she's enough she's turned 40. Can her mother still get under her skin? And I thought, yeah, definitely. And when I think about just friends and people I've met, and I just think, yeah, there's you want to think as Emma was saying to herself, I'm an adult. I have had a career. I'm a perfectly competent person, but my mum can still say stuff. She may be living in France, but she can still say stuff that gets me. That
Nobody comes to Paris in
yeah,
August.
yeah,
Maybe that was a European thing, but I was like, "Why is she so hung up on
yeah.
that?" And then it was funny because Emma's like, "Some people are still here apparently."
I
Like, what?
know, I
Like,
mean, I did remember that Paris empties in August, but
and then even Betty was like, "I don't know, apparently that was important,"
yeah,
because, like, even, like, Betty with her
yeah,
minimum drags us back to Betty, I loved her, and
yeah,
she was just, like, trying so hard to, like, be polite and socially
yeah,
appropriate, acceptable, right? Because she was almost like the opposite of Emma in a way, in some ways, but I love how she was, like, tiptoeing around it with her interaction with
yeah.
Emma's
I
mother.
love
And then
Betty.
she was
I
like,
adored
"Ye
Betty.
yeah."
She was just so kind, and a girlfriend said to me as I was writing it, I was describing Betty to her, and she said, "I think she's the sort of woman that when she gets nervous, she talks more." And I thought, that's brilliant. So you can bring that into the book, and your reader might be thinking, what the hell is going on? She's suddenly like, yak, 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 yak. And I thought, but that's so true of people sometimes, isn't it? And it's a lovely trait to weave into a book. So when she gets nervous, she's talking so much more. And like Les with his sayings. And I loved Tamas, the delivery driver, who was so
Yeah.
rude and blunt
Yeah.
and
"Oh, you remind me of my cow, you're healthy and
yeah,
strong." "What?"
I know. But I have dealt with people who are that rude. I have not I don't have particularly nice legs. That's not my I've got quite chunky ankles.
It's
And I
okay.
have Dutch
Hey,
a
own
Dutch
it.
who said to me once, "Sally, I see what you mean. You have no ankles. I see now." And I'm just like, "Thanks, Carola. I know I haven't got great ankles, but I didn't need you to tell me." But
That
generalization.
was, like, agreeability I was looking
Yeah,
for, like
but I just thought, yeah, Tamas could be that rude. Going, "Look at your feet. Look at this."
and it's so it reminds me of, I think, like, some people from certain countries are just that blunt. That's just, like,
Yeah,
that
and
some of
it's a
that, like,
generalization.
European way.
The couple of people I've met who are really blunt were Dutch, but that's not to say that
Yeah,
all Dutch people are that blunt. But
right.
because I've experienced it, I thought, yeah, I could have a character like this.
Yeah. I think It was so funny because I think that's almost if you're experienced in it, you stand
Yeah,
it, and it helps you to deal with
yeah.
it and let it
Also to
roll
laugh
over
at
you a
it,
little bit.
also to laugh at it and just go,
Yeah.
"My goodness."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks for that, but then Emma did, she rolled
yeah.
with it, and she threw it back at
But it
him, and
helped her, of
she made him
course,
laugh.
because she felt she was often saying the wrong thing through her awkwardness. So actually to meet somebody who's even ruder than she is, it's right, I feel quite relaxed about this now.
Yeah, it helped. I think, yeah, that was like her little outlet,
Mhm.
right? It makes her feel a little bit
Yeah,
better of
yeah,
he's like this, and I can shoot the shit with him, get
yeah,
it back at him, and I love that but I love their little game where she had to figure out
it's
where he
strong,
was
yeah,
from, and it was remember where, like, it would happen, she like, in the middle of conversation, she would say a country, and I was like, "Wait, what's going on?" And I was like,
yeah,
"Oh."
yeah,
They're back
yeah,
at it, and I love that because it reminds me because I my therapist is from Poland, and it reminds me of, that's what it reminds me of because like, she's got that blunt,
mm,
like, straightforward communication style, and
yeah,
it works because it's like I can make her laugh, but then also I remember one conversation we had where I was like, I wasn't sure if I was gonna have a third, and I was explaining how my second born is like a spawn of Satan. He's just I don't know if it's a second born thing, but I don't remember my first being
yeah,
destructive and so I'm like, she knows these things and she'd be like, "Do you think he's going to be better as a middle child?"
yeah,
And I'm like, it's
good
very
point.
it yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And I was like, "And then you'll be pregnant with a messy toddler. What do you want?" And I was like, "Okay." And so that's an example of,
yeah,
yeah, you're right, thank you, and I would tell my husband that too, and he's, "Oh, she's making
yeah,
sense." Like,
yeah,
but sometimes that was what reminded me of it. It's 'cause it was delivered in a very, like, straightforward way, like, no beating around the bush.
mhm,
"Hey, this is something to consider that you're not maybe you don't wanna
yeah,
face," and it was like, and then it's funny to see that in your book, like, with
yeah,
the people who like, especially with
and
Hamas,
also
where he
with
was just
Thomas
like, "Oh,
is
what? No, you look healthy and strong like my cow." Like, "What?"
but I also think with Thomas, there's that whole thing of the layers within layers that actually
Oh, yeah, he was such
he
a
was
sweetheart,
t
though, like,
yeah,
I felt for him.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Even if yeah, I know I almost wanted, like, him and I know this isn't a romantic book because this is a
yeah.
story of, like, healing.
I think the other books I've read have always had a sort of a romance. It might not be the main theme, but with this one, I thought I didn't want to without giving spoilers away, I didn't want to create a character that Emma goes off with because I thought it's not about that. This is not about a man rescuing her.
Yeah,
This is about her finding her way with a group of friends, really.
and that's so important, I'm so glad you did because there was also a point well, even when she had these interactions with these people who she grew close with, I loved that they were also, like, just so they were it was
Yeah,
organically it was so natural, like, them being there
yeah,
for her, like, the times that became so difficult for her. But I did love how I think it was where it was either Alistair it wasn't Philippe, I think it was
mm,
Alistair, and when they went to the
yeah, they
bar,
went to the bar.
and then she, like, had it was almost like, "I haven't fancied someone, like, in such a
Yeah,
long time," and
exactly.
he was like, "Girl, pick your jaw off the floor."
And that is based on a bar in Prague that I went to with my best friend. She took me to Prague for my birthday, like a big birthday, like a 40th birthday, and we saw this absolutely gorgeous barman, and so that was definitely based on him. It was so
I love
gorgeous.
that. I love that, and it's no shame, we're all
Yeah,
humans, right? We can appreciate a nice
yeah.
view. So wait, did the barman give one of you his number or
No, but
no?
my friend was going, he was we were both women in our 40s, and he was younger, and she was going, "He really
Yeah.
likes you." And I was like, "Really like him?"
Yeah. You were like,
Yeah,
"No, really?"
I took a
Like
sneaky photograph of him, but he was very lovely, but yeah, that was we were just on holiday, it was fine. I didn't take
yeah,
his number or anything like
it
that.
was a fun
It was
little
just one of
yeah.
those moments where you go, "Oh my goodness, like, a bit of chemistry going on here." So I drew on that. I
That's
drew on that for my book.
I love that. I love that. I think that's it just speaks to people. It's just and it was a little
Yeah.
surprise. It was like, "Oh, like, she's discovering
Mm.
that, reacquainting herself with that
Yeah.
part of herself." Oh, I haven't. And I loved how he, like, called her out on it. He's "Girl."
Yeah,
I love that. I just it, like, adds, like, the authenticity, the helping readers relate
yeah,
to that, and she's on a serious she's kind of it's like it's most of the story is
yeah,
serious. It's like she's dealing with some heavy shit, and she's on her journey, and she's trying to make sense of everything, and also working on
yeah,
herself and, either in whether she knows it or not, she's working on herself, but to have those little moments, like, sneak
yeah,
in to where
exactly.
it's, "Oh, no, like, he likes
Yeah,
you."
nice.
She's "What? No."
Yeah.
I love those little moments. So I'll just wrap up with another couple questions here. I'm gonna do this to you. With a two-parter. What were the most challenging parts to write? What were the most enjoyable parts to write? You kinda tapped on it
Yeah, I
earlier.
think the most difficult parts to write were obviously I'm writing about grief. That is a big part of the book. And that was, yeah, that was hard sometimes. It's a weird thing because actually, when you write something that you feel is meaningful, you have to dig quite deep for it. But actually, it comes with a lot of satisfaction. So, although it's hard, it's sometimes the best bit to write. Definitely that. And the best bit, I think, was flowers. It was just being able to weave in all the flowers, all the different varieties. And I did find writing Violet's voice, that was just flowed. It's one of those times when you write and I would just start the sentence, start the beginning and go, this is such a, and then I didn't have to think about it. She took over, and that was really lovely. That was like, gosh, I wish that happened all the time, that you let your character just be, and she was quite, the way it's written is quite quirky and quite what's going on in her mind, and I did love writing that, really loved writing that, and it has made me think, would I write more historical fiction as well? And because you were just
Mm.
getting into the mindset of somebody.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I love that. I love that because I could tell it was easy it seemed to flow easily. I was like, even though dual timelines and dual
Can be
POVs can kinda,
difficult,
like
it can be difficult. And
yeah,
particularly in this one,
yeah.
because you don't realise till the end what their connection is. So to write it, I had to, sometimes it might be a flower, like when I talk about marigolds, it brought the chapters together, or it might be that their relationships with their, particularly their fathers, they both had strong relationships with their dads, and that I would echo it in the following chapters so that it felt more like the chapters were connected, because obviously at times they didn't have that much of a connection, so it was using things like that to try and bring the two stories together.
And that was and that was also it worked out so well. Sally Page, if and when you're ready, you got whatever you're working on, whenever that's coming out, feel free to come back. You're welcome back anytime. I'd love to chat again. Thank you so much. And there you go. That was Sally Page talking about The Secrets of Flowers. That book is available on February 25th. Check out the show notes where you can find links to where you can purchase the book and to find Sally online and on social media. But while you're at it, find Cantina Book Club online and on social media. Give me a follow so that you don't miss out on anything I've got coming up. If you need book recommendations, check out cantinabookclub.com. I'm always posting reviews on there from all sorts of genres. Rate, review, subscribe. If you do find a book that you really enjoy, it really does help the authors out if you go on Goodreads and Amazon and give them a rating and review. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.